Good day everyone, my name is Doris Luciano Sauerboy. Today I will be giving a presentation on the brain and the nervous system. And the nervous system with Clive. Let's start again. Good day everyone, my name is Doris Luciano Sauerboy. Today I'll be giving a presentation on the brain and the nervous system with Clive Waring's case as the main subject. We'll also be looking at the main parts of the brain and its functions, the central and peripheral nervous system, the glia cells, the neurons, how neurons interact, and how neurotransmitters affect behavior. Right away, we'll be looking at Clive Waring. Clive Waring suffers from retrograde and anti-retrograde, a rare type of amnesia with no memory of his existence before the amnesia. He is married to Deborah. Deborah is his second wife. This disease started the first year after the first year of his marriage. He recognizes his wife, as we can see in some of the videos where he's excited to see his wife. He knows he has children but cannot remember them. With Clive, newly encoded and stored memories become declarative memories, but he still has his muscle memory. He plays the piano and he writes in his journal. Clive describes his situation as being in a state of limbo where it's like he's just waking up from a coma for the first time. The next part of this presentation is the key parts of the brain. The brain is a complex organ that regulates every bodily function, including thoughts, memory, emotion, sensation, motor skills, vision, respiration, body temperature, and appetite. The brain and the spinal cord that extends from it constitute the central nervous system. The brain is made up of the cerebellum, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. And here is the brain. This is the structure, is an image of the brain. We have the cerebrum, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. Let's quickly look at the cerebrum. It's the biggest part of the brain, containing the gray matter and white matter. It starts and manages activities and controls body temperature. The gray matter is also known as the cerebral cortex. Gray matter is also known as the cerebral cortex. The next one is the brainstem. It has three parts: the midbrain, pons, and the medulla. The midbrain has several neural clusters, neuronal connections, and other structures, which aids hearing, mobility, calculation, and environmental changes. It contains dopamine, a part of basal ganglia that controls movements. Moving on, we'll be looking at the pons. The pons is actually the bridge between the midbrain and the medulla. It's 4 of the 12 cranial nerves that forms the pons. It enables tears, chewing, blinking, balancing, hearing, and facial expression. The next one is the medulla. The medulla, brain, and the spinal cord meets here at the medulla. It aids survival, heartbeat, respiration, blood flow, and breathing. Next, we'll be moving on to the cerebellum. The cerebellum is a small part of the brain that is located at the back of the brain, at the back of the head. It has 2 halves, organizes the movements of muscles, and keep posture, balance, and equilibrium. Right away, we'll be looking at other parts of the brain. Other parts of the brain includes the hippocampus, aids memory, learning, navigation, and space perception, formation and retrieval of memories. In Clive's case, in Clive's case, the hippocampus is damaged, resulting in severe anti-retrograde and retrograde amnesia. His memory only lasts from 7 to 30 seconds. It cannot, with anti-retrograde, it's difficult. It cannot remember his past life, and it cannot even form new events. Let's move on to the prefrontal cortex. Let's move on to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, the PFC, coordinates thoughts and actions in accordance with internal goals. The executive functions, ability to separate conflicting concepts, determine good and bad, better and best, same and different, consequences of actions, goal planning, prediction of outcomes, and social control. In this case, this is a part of the brain that is associated with complex cognitive behavior. It involves planning. It's actually how humans express themselves. We call it like the personality um, system. It involves personality expression, decision making, and social behavior. Its primary function is to coordinate. It's the coordination of thoughts and actions by internal goals. Executive function, like we have here, ability to separate conflicting concepts. Ability to separate conflicting concepts. Right away, let's move on to the next slide, which is the nervous system. Now, the nervous system is the main control system that coordinates all the body's function. It works out all the body's function. It's where you have the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves. Like you can see on the screen, you have the nervous system, you have the peripheral nervous system, you have the ganglia, and the nerves. The brain and spinal cord nerves are parts of this complex system of coordination. Internal and external messages are processed by this system to coordinate functions like movement, breathing, sight, thinking, etc. It consists of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So right away, we'll be moving on to that. Let's look at the central nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. The spinal cord runs along the spine. This is what we have here, from the base of the skull, which is this, to the tailbone, which is down here. The spinal cord transmits impulses between the brain and the rest of the nervous system. This is the spinal cord that transmits impulses between the brain and the rest of the nervous system. The central nervous system interprets and coordinates internal and external information. What this means is that the central nervous system, that is the brain and the spinal cord, they work together to interpret and external information. External information gotten from the body goes to the brain, then the brain sends the messages down to the rest of the body. Let's look at the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is made up of nerves that branches off from the spinal cord and extends to all parts of the body. The primary function of the peripheral nervous system is to carry out commands of the central nervous system. This is what we have here. It's made up, collect sensory data and transmit it to the central nervous system. On the image, we have the central nervous system in purple, the brain and the spinal cord, and we have the peripheral nervous system in yellow. They are like electrical connection, cable connection, but this appears on the body as nerves. So information comes from the brain and then transmits into all the other parts of the body. Now we'll be looking at two parts of the peripheral nervous system. We have the autonomic nervous system. It regulates blood pressure, the ability to breathe, and digestion. It works out without the brain, giving it orders and helps body prepare for fight or flight. We'll be looking at this as we go on, when in a stressful situation, by working with hormonal system. The autonomic nervous system has two branches, known as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Let's move on to the somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system regulates muscles and transmits signals to the central nervous system from the ears, eyes, mouth, skin. In Clive Waring's case, this may explain why Mr. Clive uh, psychological response to emotional or stressful events are not well coordinated. It looks like it's confused. Let's move on to the next slide. The two parts of the autonomic nervous system. The two parts of the autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system works during emergency responses involving the sympathetic nervous system. It slows non-emergency biological processes like digestion. The sympathetic nervous system is actually very evident during flight, during fight or flight situations, during emergency situations, in case of a threat or a stressful event. The sympathetic nervous system comes into play and decide whether to run away, which is flight, or whether to face the situation, which is to fight it head on. The parasympathetic nervous system brings the body back to a state of rest, controls the heart rate, relax the muscles, and manage the bladder. What this actually does is to bring back the body back to its normal functioning after it must have faced an emergency situation or a threat. The parasympathetic nervous system helps to bring the body back to its normal functioning. It controls the heart rate and relaxes the muscles because, I mean, after a threat, during a threat, the heartbeat becomes really high, the stress levels become really high, muscles contract and they get tightened. But after that, the parasympathetic nervous system helps to relax the body and brings it to its normal level. In here, we have the image of what we're talking about, the sympathetic nerves and the parasympathetic nerves. At this point, we'll be looking at differences between neurons and glial cells. Axons and dendrites enable long-distance neural communication and involuntary functions are controlled by other nerves. Breakdown of communication between client neurons results in its memory and cognitive deficits. Sorry. Let's go on to look at the glial cells. Controls how neurons work and communicate. They are mainly supporting structures for neurons. The glial cell is actually a supporting cell for the neuron. It controls how the neuron communicates and how it works. Next on, we'll be looking at how neurons communicate. How neurons communicate. Neurons communicate through synaptic transmission. Now, the synaptic transmission made up of two neurons. Presynaptic sends information to postsynaptic. It's called presynaptic because it gets the first information. It gets the information first. It's the beginning of the transmission. It gets on to postsynaptic, which is the end of this transmission. Movement is by electrical activity, but interaction between neurons is a chemical process. Now, this process starts as an electrical activity, but as it goes on, it proceeds to become a chemical process. An action potential releases neurotransmitters into the synapse. Neurotransmitters bind to receptors on the receiving neuron to send the signal to the next neuron, which is what we have here. So here we have the neurotransmitters, which are these tiny circles. Then we have the synaptic, where the transmission happens. We have this is the neurotransmitter receptor, where it comes in from the neurotransmitters and then gets onto the postsynaptic. This whole frame is known as the axon terminal. Moving on to the next slide, let's look at the role of neurotransmitters. So we have the neurotransmitters, we have the serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine. For serotonin, regulates mood, sleep, and appetite. For dopamine, it's known as the happy neurotransmitter. It affects memory, mood, motivation, and movement. And in some studies, it has been linked to Parkinson's disease. And we know the Parkinson's disease affects how a person moves his body. Acetylcholine initiates contractions in the muscles for cognitive functions such as memory and linked to Alzheimer's disease, which has to do with loss of memory. So, um, a delay or a breakdown in any of these has caused imbalances in the neurotransmitters due to brain damage. May, this may have contributed to Clive's cognitive and emotional difficulties. Let's move on to the next slide, which is our conclusion. In conclusion, the Clive Irwin case study provides a unique chance to study important aspects of the brain and the nervous system, gaining important insights into the brain's complexity and its impact on daily life. By examining the major structures and functions of the brain affected in Clive Irwin case, we gain an understanding of the differences between the central, peripheral, and autonomic nervous system, exploring the roles of glandular cells and neurons, understanding the process of communication between neurons, and discussing the role of neurotransmitters in behavior. So this is what this presentation is all about. I hope you enjoyed it and I am open for questions at this time. Thank you.